that camera the away from me.
I was so appalled by the way I looked.
What movie you want to see? You want to see a Pedro Pascal movie? You want to see a Pedro Pascal movie? Or do you want to see a Pedro Pascal movie? Which Pedro Pascal movie do you want to see?
I even saw a video from comedian Chris D'Elia making fun of him earlier today.
Pedro Pascal, you're in too many things, right? You're a great actor. Pedro Pascal is a great actor. I would never argue that he's not a great actor. Yo, bro.
What's up, man?
I'm surprised that wasn't Pedro fucking Pascal, all right? Because he's in too many things. He's in that car. Pedro Pascal was in my cereal this morning. Hey, we're gonna stop saying he's a great actor. And we're gonna stop doing that so we can stop thinking about it. And we're gonna stop thinking about him so we can stop being in things. Hey, Pedro Pascal, how many movies can you do? Have a family. Go on vacation.
To be safe and to be protected, and I want very much to live on the right side of history.
I too want to be on the right side of history, and I have a feeling the right side of history is going to be on whatever side is the opposite of Pedro Pascal.
Pedro Pascal didn't just leave Disney. He was cut out, erased, and possibly replaced before he even knew it was happening. One day, he was the face of Marvel's most anticipated reboot. The next, his name had quietly vanished from Avengers plans. No phone call, no cameo, not even a mid-credits tease, just gone. And when he finally found out, not from the studio, not from his agent, but from reading a headline, the reaction was instant. Backstage at a Marvel press event, he reportedly told a close friend, "They left me out." Within hours, whispers started. Pedro had stormed out of Disney's orbit, and he wasn't going quietly. This wasn't about scheduling conflicts, like the press spin suggested.
And now it's looking like Fantastic Four is gonna bomb. I think Pedro Pascal fatigue is real. And people are tired of this guy. He's in everything. He's constantly in all these magazines and websites are trying to say this is the sexiest man alive. There's that weird photo shoot where everyone's rubbing his face. All of the creepy anxiety things of him grabbing Vanessa Kirby's ass and face all the time is really weird.
This was a deliberate move, a decision made behind closed doors while cameras were still rolling. And what followed wasn't just a career shift. It was a full-blown fallout involving deleted scenes, tense red carpets, and a press tour meltdown that Marvel hoped you'd forget. Because the deeper you dig, the clearer the picture becomes, a tangled web of corporate politics, on-set drama, and personal relationships that became too risky for the most image-obsessed company in Hollywood. And the spark that lit the fire? A co-star, a rumor, and one very dangerous secret meeting.
Dislike and mockery were two primary videos. One of Pedro and his Fantastic Four co-star Vanessa Kirby touching him affectionately in a series of clips.
Terrible confession to make in front of Gordon.
It's because some of the best men in the world, so they don't count. He's my yummy old man.
Yes.
I am your cool slutty daddy.
I actually have no idea what to do with this.
What happened next didn't just change Pedro's career, it exposed the cracks in the entire Marvel machine. And this is where the story begins. For months, Pedro Pascal believed he was part of Marvel's grand plan. He'd signed on as Reed Richards in the Fantastic Four reboot, a role fans had begged for since 2023, and filming had gone smoothly, or so he thought. Then, as production wrapped, the truth hit him like a gut punch.
Just like we see with every single Marvel movie released, the big lead up, the excitement, the hype that the mainstream media desperately tries to generate. Then the early access screenings come out and they tell you it's the best thing ever. Then the reviews come out. Then the opening weekend happens. And even when the opening weekend is weak, like it was with Fantastic Four First Steps, they tell you, oh my gosh, everybody, Marvel's back, watch out. And it always ends up happening this way, where the second weekend falls off a cliff, and that is what we saw for Fantastic Four. But would it rebound in its third weekend? Well, of course it didn't.
While the rest of the cast was quietly slipping into secret Avengers crossover meetings, Pedro wasn't even in the room. No invite, no update, not even a courtesy call from Kevin Feige's team. The reveal didn't come in some private email or late-night phone call. It came from a trade headline, a glowing piece about the Avengers' new post-credits scene, one that set up a multiversal threat. Without the Fantastic Four, without him, sources say Pedro's shock quickly turned to disbelief. How could Marvel spend months hyping him as the MCU's next cornerstone, only to ghost him when it mattered most? Backstage at a press event, he allegedly vented to a close friend, "They left me out." In that moment, the image of Marvel as a well-oiled, loyal machine began to crumble.
Brand Marvel used to sell tickets in and of itself. It almost didn't matter what the movie was. People were interested because they were so bought into the MCU. And in particular, late into phase 3, it was just people trusted they were going to get a good movie.
So here's the piece from Deadline magazine. Fantastic Four First Steps, $40 million second frame. Just to remind you, it wasn't even a week ago that Deadline magazine was projecting a $48 million second weekend, a 60% drop from the first weekend. And then over the next few days after that, it became a 45 to 47 million.
This wasn't a scheduling issue. This was exclusion, and it was intentional. And for Pedro, the realization came with another chilling question. If the decision had been made months ago, who else already knew? Pedro Pascal didn't quietly bow out. He detonated. The moment the Avengers snub sank in, he began pulling out of Disney obligations one by one. Promotional shoots canceled. Scheduled interviews suddenly unavailable. And when he did show up, his smiles looked more like teeth. Insiders claim the breaking point came during a high-profile press event.
Bob Iger is now having issues with Pedro Pascal. Just days ago, they already punished Pascal by reducing his press tour appearances and urging him to stop and cut it out with his politics. However, now Bob Iger took action against Pedro in the most unexpected way possible, where he canceled an entire featurette for Fantastic Four that was filmed, focusing strictly on Pedro as Reed Richards.
Backstage, Pedro's voice could be heard. Sharp, furious, unapologetic. According to one crew member, he went off about hypocrisy in the MCU. If you're going to preach family on camera and ice people out behind it, then what's the point? But he didn't stop there. Leaks say he accused the studio of protecting a toxic inner circle, one that stretched from Marvel executives to his own Fantastic Four cast. That alone would have made headlines. What set the internet on fire was who he allegedly named in that rant. Vanessa Kirby, the same co-star he'd been inseparable from on red carpets. The same woman gossip blogs were already pairing with him in rumored on-set romance threads. And just like that, Pedro's personal life was now part of the fallout.
Pedro Pascal and Vanessa Kirby have been going viral lately because of their press tour for Fantastic Four and how they just can't seem to keep their hands off each other.
I just knew he would be an incredible partner, and I knew that he would play a man, as he always does with all his characters, who's just not what you expect. And I think it needed it. Mr. Fantastic is the leader.
And Disney had the perfect distraction from the real story. Because while the press feasted on affair rumors, the truth was something far more calculated. Pedro was about to find out just how deep the betrayal went. Vanessa Kirby had always been a media darling, elegant, articulate, and, during Fantastic Four's early press run, practically glued to Pedro Pascal's side. Photos of them laughing, leaning close, whispering during interviews, the kind of chemistry you couldn't fake, even if you wanted to. But beneath the glossy red carpet smiles, something else was brewing. At the time, Kirby was engaged and expecting her first child. The closeness between her and Pedro quickly crossed into tabloid territory, with headlines hinting at an unusual bond that went beyond co-stars. Then came the rumor that shifted everything. Kirby had allegedly been briefed about the Avengers exclusion before Pedro knew. Reports claim she attended a closed-door London meeting with Marvel higher-ups without him, just weeks before the news broke. When Pedro confronted her privately, sources say it ended in a tense, hours-long conversation that neither H spoken about publicly since. From that point on, the warmth in their public appearances cooled. Gone were the arm-in-arm arrivals. Instead, they kept a careful distance, their interactions reduced to polite smiles. For Pedro, the Vanessa factor wasn't just about gossip. It was about trust, and the sinking realization that the inner circle cutting him out might have included the person standing right next to him. And if that was true, then the Fantastic Four itself wasn't just a team, it was a ticking time bomb. Marvel's handling of Pedro Pascal's removal wasn't messy, it was methodical. While cameras were still rolling on Fantastic Four, the rest of the cast quietly started getting invitations to Phase 7 alignment meetings. These hush-hush gatherings weren't just about the next Avengers movie. They were about shaping Marvel's next decade. Every member of the team was there, except Pedro. Behind the scenes, executives were already floating a new strategy. Keep Fantastic from the core Avengers timeline until talent conflicts resolved. In corporate speak, that meant Pedro's days as Reed Richards were numbered. Step by step, the signs became impossible to ignore. His name vanished from early promotional documents for crossover projects. PR schedules were reshuffled, so he'd miss key group interviews. And during a fan Q&A, the moderator awkwardly skipped any question linking him to the Avengers storyline, as if the connection had never existed. Sources inside Marvel say the decision came down to risk management. The Pedro problem, as one insider allegedly called it, wasn't about performance. It was about perception. The studio wasn't willing to bet a billion-dollar franchise on a star they saw as unpredictable. And once that label stuck, the machine began quietly phasing him out. The cruelest twist? Pedro wouldn't realize how far it had gone until footage he'd already filmed simply disappeared. By the final weeks of filming, the Fanta set felt less like a superhero family and more like a divided camp. On one side, Pedro Pascal and Vanessa Kirby still appearing cordial but often huddled together between takes. On the other, the rest of the cast, keeping interactions professional but distant. Crew members noticed the shift. Group lunches became rare. Cast dinners stopped entirely. One insider claimed the tension was palpable, like everyone was bracing for an explosion that never quite happened on set, but definitely simmered beneath the surface. Disney's corporate radar picked up on it fast. For a studio obsessed with brand harmony, the optics were dangerous. An A-lister tied to swirling rumors, visible division in the cast, and leaked stories about internal conflict, that was a nightmare waiting to tank ticket sales. Executives began discussing containment. PR handlers shadowed Pedro during events, steering conversations away from sensitive topics. Studio talking points were rewritten to focus on team unity. Even as the team itself fractured, privately, some decision-makers argued it was cheaper to distance Pedro now than to navigate a full-blown PR disaster later. And in Hollywood math, later can mean weeks. By the time the cameras stopped rolling, the verdict was clear. The safest move for Marvel was to shrink Pedro's presence, both on-screen and off. But shrinking him in marketing was one thing. Erasing him from the film was something else entirely. Pedro Pascal had filmed some of Fantastic Four's most pivotal scenes, moments that in early drafts set up Reed Richards as a central figure in the Avengers' next era. But when the first test screenings rolled out, something was off. His screen time had been slashed. Entire sequences were missing. One of the biggest cuts? A dramatic post-battle exchange between Reed Richards and Doctor Strange. A scene Marvel had teased internally as the bridge to the next Avengers saga. In the final edit, it was gone, replaced by a brief. Benedict Cumberbatch talking to no one. Sources say reshoots were ordered under the guise of tightening the pacing, But crew whispers tell a different story. Pedro's lines were reassigned to other characters. Key shots were reframed, so he barely appeared. Even promotional stills were quietly replaced with images that cropped him out entirely. It wasn't just editing, it was rewriting history, the kind of surgical removal that made it look like he'd never been meant for the larger MCU at all. When Pedro found out, friends say his reaction was a mix of disbelief and bitter humor. Guess I never made it to the multiverse. But beneath the sarcasm, the message was clear. Marvel had decided his legacy would be smaller than the role he signed for. And if that was their endgame, they were about to find out Pedro Pascal doesn't vanish without a fight. Marvel's PR machine moved faster than any superhero in their lineup. Within days of Pedro's footage quietly disappearing, Glow, entertainment outlets were running stories about scheduling conflicts and mutual creative decisions. No mention of the internal fallout, the snub, or the fact that his scenes had been gutted. Instead, the narrative shifted to something safer and juicier. Suddenly, gossip columns were overflowing with speculation about Pedro's off-screen chemistry with Vanessa Kirby. Paparazzi shots of the two laughing during early press tours were recycled, framed as proof of a rumored romance. It worked like a charm. Social media exploded with theories, fan edits, and ship names, drowning out any serious discussion about Marvel's decision to cut him. Even late-night hosts jumped in, poking fun at the alleged love triangle without touching the corporate drama behind it. Insiders say this was no coincidence. Feeding the tabloids was a deliberate distraction, one that kept public curiosity pointed at Pedro's personal life instead of Marvel's boardroom politics. And the more outrageous the ruse, the easier it became to sidestep the real story. Pedro saw it happening in real time. Friends say he felt trapped. Speak up, and he'd fuel the narrative. Stay quiet, and it looked like guilt. But behind the scenes, he was already plotting his countermove, one that wouldn't just clear his name. It would force Marvel's hand. After weeks of relentless rumors and carefully planted headlines, Pedro Pascal did something no one expected. He went silent. No statements, no clarifications, not even a cryptic Instagram post. For a man known for his warmth and accessibility with fans, the sudden quiet felt calculated. Industry watchers began to suspect that silence wasn't weakness, it was strategy. By refusing to feed Marvel's distraction campaign, Pedro kept the focus from straying too far into tabloid territory. More importantly, it gave him time to gather information. Sources close to him claim he'd begun reaching out to trusted journalists and former Marvel crew members, piecing together a timeline of decisions and leaks. The goal wasn't just to air grievances, it was to prove a pattern of exclusion that started long before the public knew. There were whispers of a tell-all interview, not a vague PR-approved sit-down, but a high-profile conversation where he'd walk through every snub, every cutscene, and every behind-the-scenes betrayal in detail. If that happened, Marvel's clean narrative would shatter overnight. Contracts, NDAs, and corporate intimidation were all meant to keep him quiet. But friends say Pedro was weighing the cost of breaking them. And while Marvel assumed they'd erased him from the MCU, Pedro was preparing to make sure his side of the story would be impossible to cut. Pedro's situation wasn't an isolated clash. It was part of a pattern that had been quietly playing out at Disney and Marvel for years. A-listers brought in with fanfare, only to be sidelined, reshuffled, or written out when they didn't fit the evolving corporate agenda. Look closely, and the signs were there. Directors abruptly stepping down from dream projects. Actors quietly replaced mid-production. Scripts rewritten to downplay characters that once seemed central. Public explanations always boiled down to the same vague phrases: creative differences or scheduling conflicts. Insiders say it's about control. Marvel runs a sprawling, interconnected universe where one unpredictable personality can throw off years of planning. When an actor challenges decisions, Even subtly, the studio closes ranks fast. And once the decision is made, the machine moves to rewrite the narrative so cleanly that fans forget that person was ever meant to be bigger. Pedro's cut from Fantastic Four fit that playbook perfectly. Introduce him as a cornerstone. Let the hype build, then surgically remove and replace without admitting a thing. From Marvel, between his story and others before him, a bigger question started to surface. If Disney could erase Pedro Pascal this easily, who else had they quietly removed from the Marvel universe? In the end, Pedro Pascal's journey through Fantastic Four wasn't about a bad performance, a scheduling conflict, or even the rumors that swirled around him. It was about power, who holds it, who loses it, and how quickly the story can be rewritten when a studio decides someone no longer fits their plans. Marvel didn't just cut scenes, they cut a trajectory. They took a character who could have been a linchpin for the next Avengers saga and reduced him to a footnote. And they did it so smoothly that casual fans might never know what was lost. But for those paying attention, the signs were unmistakable. The sudden PR spin, the vanishing footage, the deliberate reshaping of the narrative. It was a masterclass in corporate control and a warning to anyone who thinks a contract guarantees a legacy in Hollywood's biggest franchise. Pedro hasn't told his full story. Not yet. But the longer he stays silent, the more people wonder what exactly he's holding back, and how explosive it might be when it finally comes out. Because in a universe built on alternate timelines and multiverse possibilities, there's one storyline Marvel can't fully erase. The one where Pedro Pascal decides to play by his own rules, and the world finally hears what really happened behind the scenes.